one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening and welcome to this edition of the Planning Board. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over Lunenburg Public Access. So we are all here. Mr. Bittner is not going to make it tonight. Is there any public comment? Any board comment?
I just would like to welcome Marissa to the board. I'm happy to have you aboard.
Definitely welcome. So we, first thing on the agenda is A&R plans, 59 and 71 Wildwood Road.
Mr. Chairman, members, Mr. Director. For the record, my name is Frank Preston of Whitman and Bingham Associates. Our firm has done some work for Carolyn Poirier. And by the way, I should say, if anybody needs a small copy, I have some extras here.
You're all set.
Has done some work for Carolyn Poirier, who owns land on Wildwood Road, extending all the way up to the Townsend line. And in the course of performing that work, we found that part of her neighbor's house was sitting on her land. Turns out that was no surprise to anybody. They seemed to know all about it. So since Ms. Poirier is selling her land, and there was incentive for the two to reach an agreement, so they have done that. The two parties have reached an agreement for her neighbor to buy 4,617 square feet to fix the encroachment problem. And so that's what this plan shows. Thank you very much.
So your client's property is on the town line?
That's right.
Okay.
It was all the way up there, yeah.
Okay.
So about 9 acres or so, if I remember right.
And 16 feet, does that meet is that the side lot?
It does meet the side lot. It wouldn't need to because you're making it more conforming by eliminating the encroachment, but it does meet the setback.
That's why the lot has an extra angle in it. We figured if we could make it conform, we might as well.
Okay.
And turns out the agreement that the two landowners had a specific number of square feet in it. So we put the angle in it, held that number of square feet, and that's why it looks that way.
And the 25 feet to the fill line is just to prove that it's still off the line? I mean,
Well, no, we wanted to demonstrate to the Board of Health that it wasn't interfering with the septic system that's there. And as it happens, it's a new system, and you can tell exactly where it is because on the one side of the line, it's all woods. So, you know there's no system there. So, it's pretty easy to tell.
Very good. Anybody?
I'm all set with it.
Okay.
I would make a motion to approve the A&R plan for 71 Wildwood Road.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Will I be able to take that with me tonight?
Would you like,
The client's anxious to get going.
yeah. If you just sign this, we can sign the papers after the meeting's over.
Ms. Poirier has already moved into an apartment somewhere, and she's anxious to close the deal.
Ooh, it's much more user-friendly size.
Between the stick and the paintbrush.
That's always, I'm sure you can agree with me, that's always kind of the major decision when you start a job. What paper size am I going to use, what scale? Makes a big difference.
Is that a full-size C sheet?
I'm sorry?
Is that a full-size C sheet?
You know, I don't go by A, B, and C, Mr. Allison. It's a 24 by 36, 18 by 24, 12 by 18. That's my universe.
18 by 24?
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
Adam, thank you very much. Everybody, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate your help.
Thank you.
Next, we have an A&R plan for 99, 103, and 109 Youngs Road.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Larry Savian from Hannigan Engineering. We have before you a A&R plan. This is the old Bourne property, since has been bought by Matson Homes. We are looking to alter 2 of the 3 lots. Lot 4 has already been sold, and the perimeter is shown in blue. The old property lines are shown in yellow. Easements, they have existed before. I have a copy of the plan that was previously endorsed by this board. I'm not sure when it was, 2016, January 2016. So what we are doing, again, is looking to just alter the property lines itself to better accommodate septic systems. So a system for Lot 1 will be going in here, and a system for Lot 2 will be going over in that section. Plenty of area, more than enough uplands. Just a matter of altering the property lines themselves.
So Lot 2A and Lot 3A exist currently as reduced frontage lots?
Yes, that's correct. And again, I can show you this plan that was endorsed and has been recorded at the Registry of Deeds, if you so desire.
Could we see that?
Sure.
Thank you.
And again, those lines that are shown on that plan are shown in yellow here.
So Lot 2 and Lot 3 were created in 2016?
That's correct.
And Adam, can you talk about the reduced frontage? Is it because they're double the land area, or?
Correct.
Okay.
So the bylaw allows for frontage to be reduced from the 100 down to 50 at a minimum. And in doing so, less than 100 feet of frontage requires you to carry twice the required lot area. So all of the upland requirements would be doubled. So you would, if I remember correctly, this is an RA zone, so you'd need to have 72,000 square feet of upland at a minimum. You could have, if you have 72,000 square feet of upland, you could have as much wetland as you would like, as long as it totals out to 80,000 or greater.
Okay, so Lot 1 is actually increasing in size. The
That's
original was proposed to be 40,000 square feet, just over, and now it's proposed to be 49,000 square feet.
That's correct.
And the rear lot line on Lot 2 is shifting.
That's correct.
Okay.
This isn't the property that had the issue with the dam, is it?
No, that was Mr. Foster's property. That was over on, no, that was closer to the center of town.
Okay. The other thing about reduced frontage is that you're only allowed to have 2 next to each other.
Correct.
That's correct.
Any other questions, comments?
I just picked up on a building inspector's comment questioning the easement area as a percentage of the required frontage. But I don't see anywhere on the plan where it details out the width of those easements. Do you know the width of those easements for lots 2 and 3?
Yeah, the easements that are shown here, this is a access easement for Lot 1, and this is access easement for Lot 3 and Lot 2. And they are in more than, I think it's 30% of the frontage. But we had already gone over this one in 2016, so those easements have remained, they're still in place, what they were in 2016, so they've not been changed, other than the fact that this easement increases because of the property line itself. But the remaining easements should be virtually the same as the ones in 2016.
But they don't meet they're
Correct.
less than the 30%, or they're greater
They're
than?
greater than the 30%.
Okay.
But that doesn't impact this process, because this process doesn't guarantee that the lot is buildable. If I'm not mistaken, Lot 2 has already been granted a building permit, and the house is under construction.
I know the system is. I don't know if the house is currently under construction, but there is construction
I
on
think
Lot
there's
2.
at least a permit for it.
Yes, that's correct.
So, the person who granted that permit felt that it was either appropriate or they had adequate justification for issuing the permit. The current inspector may require additional action to permit Lot 3.
Yeah, and if you, I don't know if you recall doing this 3 years ago, but we had discussed this at this point in time, and the board was in favor of allowing this to be larger than what was required.
But that's not our jurisdiction.
Correct. I mean, the board was in favor of allowing the common driveways to be altered.
Yes.
But the common driveways and the easements are separate. So the easement is language within the reduced frontage and may
Correct.
require action by the zoning board. But that would be something the building inspector would deal with at the time of permitting.
Okay.
And again, we're on our third inspector since this was originally done, so.
Okay.
Now, yeah, everybody has a different interpretation.
Okay.
But again, it shouldn't impact
Well,
this.
yeah, no, and I just bring it up because it was his comment.
Correct.
and reviewing the A&R, and, you know, that's his wheelhouse, not really ours, but in terms of this process, I guess it makes sense to at least have the discussion, because he's well aware of it.
Yes.
And if you're aware of the fact that it exceeds
Yes.
what's allowable, then do you want to move forward at the risk of losing a lot, I guess, is what it boils down to.
But he's not changing the frontage. This is how, even if he chooses to withdraw this,
Yep.
the lots still exist as they are with the easements as they are.
Correct.
So he's still possibly in peril.
But there is remedy to it through the zoning board,
Or to change the plan theoretically.
or to change the plan. But I think in reality, the zoning board would be the
First route.
appropriate route based on what's already here, because Lot 1 has a house on it already.
Lot 4 has the house.
Lot 4, I thought there was 2 houses built on the remaining lots. Maybe I'm mistaken.
Yeah, again, there's a house on Lot 1, and there's construction on Lot 2, but...
Is it a new house on 1?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
On 4, yes. That's a
Okay,
new
on
house.
Forum. Sorry,
Yes.
maybe that's what I'm thinking of then.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, that was recently sold.
I mean, I guess from our perspective, it meets the requirements, and so I just brought it up because obviously the building inspector commented on it, and in the interest of transparency, I don't want to review a comment that could potentially create more of a hardship for you without saying something, so there you have it.
Understood.
Very good. Any more questions, comments, concerns? Take a motion.
I'll make a motion that we approve the A&R as presented for 99, 103, and 109 Youngs Road.
Second?
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate your time. Okay, very good.
right along. So, next agenda item is land acquisition, Saliba property, Northfield Road, board recommendation. I was looking back at our last agenda, I thought we talked about this last time, no?
No, there was a committee report, a rather extensive committee report from the Land Acquisition Committee, which is in your packets again. It was a written report.
Where is, that's in our packet?
I believe so.
Yes.
It's a two-pager. And I received an email from the board's representative on the Land Acquisition Committee requesting that we place this on the agenda, and the chairman said that he would like to see that as well. I'm inferring, because it was a relatively short email and didn't have any conversation, but that the committee was looking for the planning board to, I'm going to infer that they would like you to endorse the purchase of the Saliba land on Northfield Road for the purpose of their article at town meeting as
Exactly.
as a gesture of, support from the planning board that this is something that is positive for the community, and that the future development potential of that property could have a effect of a greater magnitude than the cost of the purchase and the use of that property for conservation and active recreation.
Correct.
So they would be looking for recommend approval?
Sort of, the planning board doesn't have a statutory role in acquisition articles in the way that the laws are written. It's not like a zoning article where you're required to make a recommendation. I think what they're looking for is not necessarily recommend approval, but a statement of support, as opposed to silence.
Okay.
Well, and wouldn't that recommendation come from the selectmen? Because the selectmen formed this committee.
Well, the selectmen would be making a recommendation on the article statutorily as their role as selectmen. I think, and again, I'm making a lot of inferences here, but usually when someone requests something like this, they are looking just to broaden the vocal support of an article that they feel has importance across a variety of groups. I expect that the Conservation Commission got a similar request, and that the Parks Commission also got a similar request, and that they're looking for groups that have some expertise or some view of the potential uses of this property to voice their position, again, hopefully of support, or else I don't think they'd ask you to not support their article.
That is exactly correct. Based on the last meeting of
Okay.
this committee, that is exactly what we're looking for. We're looking for that support from the Conservation Commission, from the Parks Department, from the Finance Committee, obviously from the Board of Selectmen, and from the Planning Board, and the Open Space Committee.
So for the, just over the $200,000 cost to the town, for what is it, over 300 acres?
259 acres. We did receive the grant.
Is that both properties?
Yes, we did.
259 plus
Two-
59.
Yeah, so
Right.
it's just over
Right,
300
right, just over
acres.
300,
Okay, that,
right.
So there were two grants sought?
Yes,
Have we
and we
gotten both?
received both, yes.
Both. Okay,
Yes.
excellent.
so it's just under 800,000 total purchase with all the appurtenant costs, and the grants were for 500.
The town cost is not to exceed $282,000, which comes out to $887 an acre.
Well, on the one hand, I totally support that large acreage adjacent to our recreation. However, how much does that take off the tax rolls?
Well, it's currently assessed for almost $1 million, so.
But it's in recreation, right?
It's just,
Chapter?
right.
I don't believe it's in chapter.
It's assessed at $996,900.
It could be placed in
And it was
shelter.
appraised at just over $1 million. So the 59-acre portion would be land banked for the Parks Commission, and the 259-acre portion would be under the control and custody of the Conservation Commission. It does provide connectivity to existing recreational land as well as wildlife habitat and water quality, because that is the Mulpus Brook again. The Parks Commission, in our existing master plan and in our existing open space plan, the need for additional park space is identified as a need for the community, so this would offer that option. We have walked the property. There are two, actually we've already had a couple, but there's another site walk on November 3rd, which is Sunday at 10 a.m. for anyone interested in seeing the property. But a lot of work has gone into this property by a variety of individuals, and we strongly feel that it's in the town's best interest to acquire this property because of its meaningful value as far as recreational and nature preservation.
I mean, personally, I don't have anything to say against it. I think that's a beautiful part of town, and I appreciate open space. I just question our role in this process, because I feel like, when we went through the whole marijuana thing, which was well within our jurisdiction, we didn't seek the support of any other committees. That's our responsibility. We put it forward. The only time we went in front of the Board of Selectmen was for the ballot issues, which is in their wheelhouse. And so it's a reason for pause when I feel like we're stepping outside of our jurisdiction to support something that really isn't planning.
Well, master planning is obviously within our wheelhouse, and in our master plan, it notes the need for additional recreational space, because recreational space is planning. Preservation of open space is planning, and both of those are talked about in our existing master plan and will be in our new update for master plan. So maintaining rural character is one of the goals of our existing master plan. So anytime you preserve land, it certainly plays into a planning component, and both of these purchases fall directly within our existing master plan. So I believe it's completely appropriate for the planning board to weigh in on this acquisition, because planning of the use and building of our town is absolutely within our wheelhouse. So therefore, planning what land is going to be preserved and why is absolutely a planning job. So I think it does fall within our wheelhouse to make at least a show of support, because if you look at our open space is a subcommittee of the planning board, because preserving open space is an important part of planning of our community.
But this is an open space.
Sure, it will be. This will be. But open space, the Land Acquisition Committee has representatives from the Planning Board, the Open Space Committee, the Finance Committee. So
What I'm saying is this committee report was not open space.
But our Land Acquisition Committee is really a tie-off of the open space. Open Space has talked about this acquisition. Members from all of the land use boards that are directly affected, including the Planning Board, Mr. Bittner sits on this Land Acquisition Committee as the Planning Board representative. Because the Planning Board, the Open Space, and the Conservation Commission obviously are the most affected departments and committees. So therefore, that's why we have a member on this. So, for us to weigh in is absolutely appropriate, as is the weighing in of the Open Space Committee and the Conservation Commission and the Finance Committee, which all make up this, and the Selectmen all make up this group. So they are simply coming back to the individuals that they are reporting to and saying, we're looking for you to support this.
I mean, like I said, personally, I don't have anything against it. I just, this is the Board of Selectmen's committee. They created the committee. They have,
But we appoint our representative to that committee.
but the committee was created by the Board of Selectmen.
Right.
Yes or no?
Yes?
So it's their committee, and I just feel like, I have the same feeling when it comes to master planning, because there's a lot of activity by the Board of Selectmen that is master planning. And so I'm just looking for clear channels, is basically what it boils down to. And where there's no statutory place for the planning board to make a recommendation on this article, we didn't create the article, I have that as a reason for pause.
I think I would, if asked, would agree with you if the board were taking it up of their own volition. I think where you are being asked, I think it opens the door to give the board that opportunity to comment. Similar to, the 61A stuff, you're required you're not required to, you're required to be notified. The Board of Selectmen requests a comment from the planning board on 61 purchases. It's more, the way that I've seen this in this interaction is this seems more as a request from another committee for input from the planning board. And so they're looking for some sort of comment, as opposed to the planning board saying, oh, well, maybe we don't like this and we want to comment against it. And stepping outside of a clear lane, to use the language that you used. Not that it should sway you one way or the other, but I think it's
like
different.
I said, personally, I'm a fan of conservation and, preserving natural spaces in town. But I feel like this is a little bit outside the planning board wheelhouse, and I understand where they're trying to build support for the article, and if I had to vote on the thing today at town meeting, I'd most likely vote in favor of that, but as a board, I think we need to be very focused on what our role is.
I kind of agree and I kind of disagree. Welcome to town government. Nothing is real clear, okay? In very few cases is anything cut and dry. But what I will say for my 8 years involvement is that I wish that the groups and the boards and the committees would work together more and support each other more and have more consensus. And this is, in my mind, and to further Paula's point, the chair of this group is also the chair of our open space ad hoc. So, I mean, and hearing it from Adam, the way that he described it, took my reluctance away, for the most part. They reached out to us, and I think that that's a good thing. I wish that we would do that more often to other groups. I wish that other groups would do this with everybody.
Yeah. But I think there's a distinct difference between what we're doing here, which is supporting another committee's recommendations, and collaborating. I wish there was more collaboration between us and the selectmen, because I feel like the selectmen, year after year, put article warrants out there to, convey or alter or demolish town properties, and that's all master planning elements. I mean, that's clearly what master planning is. And I wish there was more collaboration there. I think we'd be a lot further along in the process there. But there are certain responsibilities that the selectmen take care of that I'm not going to weigh in on, nor would I solicit their support for anything we're trying to do, unless it was required by statute. I look at that as their sandbox. They controlled the ballot when it came to the marijuana thing, and so we went there and asked them to do that. But otherwise, I don't think we should be taking any of our work to them, or vice versa, or going to town meeting endorsing something that really statutorily we have no obligation or requirement to endorse. I feel like the planning board is being used to sway people's opinion when it comes to the vote. And if it was required, according to Mass General Law, I'd say, by all means, let's vote yes or no. But, you know.
I believe that we have a representative that sits on this committee as a representative of the planning board. We've been been apprised of the situation from the beginning. I believe that the reason we sit on that committee is because it is part of our master planning goals and statutory requirements. I think this acquisition falls directly in line with the goals of the Open Space Committee and our master plan. I agree with Mr. Allerson that we need to collaborate more, not less. We have a committee that's come to us looking for a recommendation. Again, we have a sitting member on this committee who has worked on this project, and I believe we should support it at town meeting, and therefore I would make a motion that the planning board support this acquisition at town meeting if asked for opposition. And that is a motion.
Is there a second?
Second that.
Further discussion?
I have a question for clarification. You're talking about just supporting it at a town meeting?
Yeah, what else would we support? That's the request.
And
They are
again, I don't
looking,
know
they are
if you want to
looking,
write a letter, if you just want the board to stand up and say that we support this as a board at town meeting. I just want to be
Either way, I mean,
clear what the motion is for.
the motion is to support this acquisition.
Okay, that's fine.
That is the motion. And the intent, because I was at the meeting, the intent is to look for recommendations for a town meeting if requested for recommendations.
And is that what you seconded?
Yeah.
Okay. So further discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Nay.
Aye. Thank you. Economic Development Committee, continued discussion.
So you have the printed final charge. You have the corrected, the redlined one, but I put a clean copy on everybody's station.
Which one is
Seat.
current, the not red
The
line?
one
or
without the red
line?
on it is the
The one
current.
without the red on it, yeah.
And that reflects everything that we've talked about at the last couple of meetings. The board had, at its last meeting, said that they liked what we've gotten to, but they wanted to wait for the full board to be here to vote on it, and here we sit down a member again, so I'll leave it to the board how you want to handle that.
Has Mr. Bittner provided any feedback on this?
I have not gotten any feedback that I'm aware of.
My recollection was he was in favor of it as it sat, right? At the last meeting?
He wasn't at the last meeting.
He wasn't at the last
No,
meeting?
he was not.
Oh. Well,
Marissa, have you had a chance to review it? I am fine with it as it's drafted. I don't have a problem adopting it this evening. I don't have a problem waiting either if the board wants to wait, but it's been several weeks now that we've been waiting for a full board, so.
it's been a couple years in the making.
Exactly. I think it's a good start, and I think we can always change it if we need to, but I think this is a very good start, and I think there's a lot of work to be done, and I would like to see the committee start getting to work.
issues with it.
So I would make a motion that the planning board adopt the Lunenburg Economic Development Committee charge as drafted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Super, unanimous. Thank you very much.
So what is the next step? Now we put out talent bank forms?
Well, we'll put out talent bank forms for the two members at large.
Uh-huh. And then notify the other
And we'll notify
commissions?
the other 3 boards that it's been created, we'll send them the charge, or the
Okay.
other 4 boards, I guess, and have them appoint
someone.
members.
Fantastic.
Nice. One more thing accomplished.
Who appoints the Lunenburg business owner?
This board.
This board?
Yeah. So what I'll probably do is reach out to the LBA and have them circulate information, because they're the really only conduit we have to the business community, other than me walking into every business and saying, who owns this? Would you like to be on our committee? Which, could take a while.
All right, so our next agenda item is solar bylaw discussion.
So, we talked about a couple of things at the last meeting. I started my research, but the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen and the School Committee are having a symposium on growth tomorrow night, so I've been my head in the census and whatnot for the past couple of weeks. So I have a bunch of bylaws that I've started going through, but I don't really have much. What I do have is these 2 things that I actually received from a colleague who was also looking at solar bylaws. And they're kind of a quick breakdown of how other communities permit bylaws, permit solar in some ways. The matrix shows size definitions and how, whether they use nameplate capacity or footprint, and it's 8 nameplate capacity, 8 footprint, so it's being done both ways. And then the other sheet is just some restrictions and a summary of those restrictions that they have. The big thing that came up, I know that the question about buffering came up, and I am working on putting together sort of a similar document on how other communities do buffering, but whether or not we can restrict it as a primary use in residential zones. And I did speak with council about that. And the short answer is it's complicated. You can do it. Solar does enjoy some 40A Section 3 protections, similar to agriculture, but there isn't a lot of case law that gets into it, because although there have been numerous lawsuits around solar, ourselves included, they usually get settled quickly, and I'll use the air quotes for quickly because, we spent about 9 months settling it, but in a land court case, that's quick. And most of the cases aren't going to judgment by the judge, because the solar companies are doing the economics of their projects based on the specific programs they get into, whether it's SREC 1 or SMART. And if they get into litigation and actually have to try the case, that program's going to be gone and the project's going to die anyway. So there's a number of communities on here you'll see that don't permit them in residential zones. We talked about permitting it in the residential zone, but as an accessory as opposed to a primary use. You'll also see that some of these communities that permit by nameplate capacity are using a much higher nameplate capacity for small scale than we are. 250 kW is it's 25 times what we're allowing as small scale. So, we can look at a couple of different things. We can also allow different footprints, nameplate capacities in different zoning districts, and control it through that. So there's options on how the board wants to look at that. And all of that, I think, informs things that we move on to. Something else that I came across that I'll throw out while we're talking about it, just before I go too much further with it and see if the board's in favor of it, is the meadow, and I'll use that term because that's what all the solar companies use, that grows within the panels, within the array, is often just a mixture of grasses, fescues, clover, but there is a push through the University of Massachusetts to start certifying pollinator habitats
gonna say pollinator.
amongst the arrays. I did raise this to town council. He said, well, you can require anything you want. He said, the only thing you want to be careful of is if it's an expensive or onerous process, someone could appeal it as unreasonable regulation. You can give yourself the ability to waive it. This process, it's about $20,000 to get certified, and then it's $5,000 every 3 growing seasons to be recertified. Over a 20-year life of a solar field, you're probably in a, $80,000 to $100,000 range when you add in engineering and all of that stuff. Not being an economist or an engineer, I don't know if that's completely out of the ballpark of what's in there, but it's something that I think would be a benefit to our community, a benefit to the environment, and even if we don't require the certification, we can require them to use the plant list, we can require
Exactly.
them to abide by all of the things that go with it, and there's an extensive amount of information that comes along with this that includes plants that are pollinator habitat plants of all sizes, from low growth to screening, so something that we could incorporate in as this is material we want you to start using.
Right, and the Conservation Commission has a great deal of
Yes.
information on that because they are working with someone who created a pollinator habitat. So we have those resources.
And I know that's something that they've started trying to negotiate with people who are building solar fields and other projects that have areas where they can do it.
Right.
And this would take it out of, this small area over here is pollinator habitat, and create a much larger. And the way that I understand it, and again, I did a very cursory review of the information, was they actually suggest a series of plants that don't grow greater than 18 or so inches within the array. So there's no mowing required. So it takes some of that cost burden off of I'm sure it's not an incredible cost, but having to have someone go out with a mower and mow those arrays and maintain that off of the solar companies, and worrying about the interaction with their panels. So it sounds like the board is in favor of that, so it's something I'll start to look at a little bit more.
I went to a pollinator lecture at the library a few months back, and the specifics about the habitat was more about the feeding creatures than the plants themselves, and they've got short, medium, and long tongues, and there are hundreds of different species of certain things. So I might also look to ask people in the know as to supplying some of the more endangered pollinators versus, some, like even wasps. I mean, who wants to promote wasps? Anybody? Anybody like wasps? I don't like wasps. But, the honeybees, the bumblebees, the hummingbirds, and so anyways, if we could get that kind of an input. Sure. It would be great too. Did we get any feedback from Unitil on the size allowances on roof mounts?
I did not ask them about that. I did send an inquiry about their connection requirements,
Okay.
because I know that's been a sore spot in the past. I have not received anything back, but I will follow up with them.
Okay. Questions, comments?
Looking at, can you just explain to me the line on your spreadsheet from Montague? What's not permitted? It's not permitted in industrial?
Not permitted in any industrial, or in any residential zone.
Okay.
Historic, industrial, and industrial by special permit, not permitted in
Okay,
any
and not
residential
permitted in,
zone.
okay, I just didn't understand where that not permitted went. Okay, thank you. And any information about what a residential C zone is in Athol? Is that like
I think
outlying
it-
for
I think
us?
it's a
Is that-
larger lot
is it- So that's
residential,
probably
yeah.
our outlying?
Yeah, I would,
I think what's interesting for me in this situation is, a lot of people look at solar arrays as an industrial use. But from a planning perspective, I think for us to limit it to only industrial areas may not have the best impact in terms of tax revenue, because you're taking the land that will support industry and installing infrastructure that doesn't need that zoning. Like our industrial zone is the only land we have that has good highway access, and we have better infrastructure in terms of water, sewer, and all that. But,
I mean, comparatively.
let's put it this way, if you're looking to put a warehouse somewhere, you put it in an industrial zone, the solar is a little more flexible, and I'm not saying that to say, I support putting it in all the residential zones. I'm just saying it's interesting to me, because when we went through the whole marijuana debate in terms of where we would allow that in town, I was a strong supporter of putting it primarily in industrial areas, because I feel it's a real industrial use. The other thing that's interesting about solar to me is it's temporary.
Yeah,
I don't know of many solar arrays that are on owned land.
no.
They're leasing the
Very
land for 20 years or 30 years or whatever it is. And so, yes, it could be characterized as a commercial use, but it's a use with a timeline on it. I'm not saying that they won't renew a lease and so on.
No, or
but-
change the
But
technology.
there's definitely, a fork in the road at some point in terms of how the lease is arranged. So you could theoretically put an array in, and then if the owner of that property chooses not to renew the lease, the array goes away, and now it's back to residential
And I think that, from a,
or commercial or
Yeah.
whatever,
to your point about it, people do see it as an industrial use, and I think that from an economic or a more strict look at it, yeah, it's producing money for someone in some way. From a Euclidean zoning perspective, it's not industrial in that noise, smoke, dust, vibration, noxious gas, the kind of things that,
Traffic.
that they were separating industrial uses to buffer residential uses from. You're not getting from solar, other than the aesthetic of it, but some people build ugly houses, and you have to look at those too. But I mean, I understand why people don't want to take up all of the residential land with solar. But it's a tough one, and especially where it does technically have a 40A3 protection in state law, which you don't see for industrial uses, you see for farming uses. And so you
Yeah.
get into this really odd space.
I guess for me, the thing I've heard from the public the most is screening. I can't think of another issue that has popped up in Lunenburg with any of the arrays that we've reviewed in the last couple of years that,
I think tree cutting is the other.
I was just going to say deforestation is
And-
the other big one.
And if you look at the one that I got from a colleague, there are some communities where they're limiting how many acres you can clear cut.
Right, and I like that, looking at this, no greater, it has to, no greater than 10 acres of forest clearing, no solar installation shall exceed 16 acres or 30% of the lot, no more than 50% of the land utilized for solar facilities shall contain land requiring clearing of forests. I think that's something we need to talk about.
That's something, as I look through the bylaws, I'll kind of pull that language out and see what it says, how it says it, and what we want to look at.
Yeah.
I guess the challenge I'd have with that, from my perspective, is that, yes, they're clearing land, but if it's a residential zone and they wanted to clear that for houses, there's nothing that stops them from clear cutting it for houses. And so I feel like you're taking a use that if you just look at the economics of it for the town, and that's part of this discussion, and that's why we have zoning, is a solar array generates a fair amount of revenue and puts very little to no burden on the town's infrastructure. There's no solar arrays that are enrolling kids in school.
I agree completely, but the other part of it is, from a rural aesthetic standpoint, it can potentially have an impact, so I think we've got to look at balancing that with the revenue component.
And I agree wholeheartedly, but the reality is, if somebody wants to clear cut it, look at Gilchrist Street. We went through all kinds of meetings and discussions about selling land and trading land and conserving land. They clear cut 7 acres. That, at least, if not more.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yep.
And the whole goal with that discussion was to provide better access and to protect the Mulpus. The last time I drove by, it didn't look like we were protecting anything. The thing is clear cut wall to wall. And so, I understand the sentiment and the thought process behind it, to say we don't want to see large swaths of forest cleared for solar. And if the alternative was not clearing it, I would support it 100%, but the alternative is
Development.
And that I sat through a conservation meeting where they were really supporting the land swap at Gilchrist Street to avoid clear cutting and avoid deforestation and protect the land. And I think we clear cut more land at the end of the day. So I guess that's the challenge with it. And,
the reality is the board could look at that several ways. There are some communities that have general bylaws that limit the cutting of trees on private property to avoid exactly what you're talking about. And if that's something the board's concerned about, we could look at proposing a general bylaw that does that in conjunction with a clause in the solar bylaw that would limit clear cutting, and that, then you get into sort of balancing those two, and even a residential development would fall within the,
Deforestation.
you need to do something that retains trees.
I love that idea.
And I've only read news articles about them being proposed. I haven't gone and researched what's included in them and what the impact is, but if I'm not mistaken, I think Shrewsbury has one, and I do know someone who works over there, so I could contact them and see what what they've done and kind of how it's worked out and how they implement it.
Air just adopted one at the beginning of this year.
Air did? Oh, okay. I can call, what's his name, Alan?
So I guess from my perspective anyway, the big thing I'd like to address is the screening, because I feel like that's...
Yeah, and that's where I'm kind of
That's the red
focused right
flag
now.
that always pops up. Everybody
Yeah.
seems to be concerned about that, and I feel like that's a nice kind of straightforward path we can take and just focus on that and have something ready for Springtown meeting. And
is the board interested in changing the way that we regulate small scale, large scale? Do we want to add medium scale? Do we want to?
I think that we've got to look at the size of the systems, and looking at all of these towns that are on this list, we're obviously significantly under what's allowed in other communities. And is that where we want to be? I mean, as you said, we're 25 times less.
And do we want to use nameplate capacity, or do we want to use square footage?
Right, so I think we've got to talk about the size of the systems.
Because when I first started working with solar arrays, you're talking 5 to 6 acres for a megawatt. I think we're down to like 3.5 for a megawatt
Right.
now. So as the technology increases, the impact shrinks because the panels are becoming more efficient.
Right.
And if we're talking about nameplate capacity, if someone's like, well, I can get these panels really cheap, and I want to put up a 5 megawatt system, but it's going to take me 35 acres, and this guy's like, look, I got the next best thing, I'm going to put up a 5 megawatt, and it's going to be 18 acres because I'm using the most efficient, highest technology panels. They're completely different, but we're regulating them the same way.
Right.
Whereas if we say it has to be X percentage of the lot as a footprint,
Yeah, I
or
like how some of
no
them
more
have
than
that.
this footprint, and we know what we're looking at, and they have to figure out the economics based on that footprint, not on how much power they can gain. So if somebody comes in and can put in a 7 megawatt system because they're willing to spend the money on a panel that's going to last for 40 years and is more efficient, then I don't know that should be something we want to be worried
Right,
about, because
right.
we're worried about how it's impacting the people who live around it and our ecosystem. And if it's a 20 acre footprint, if it's 1 megawatt or 100, it's the same impact.
It's the same impact, right, right, I agree. And I really like the idea of incorporating the pollinator when we talk about the plant material, even if we just incorporate the plant material for pollinator habitats.
Yeah.
I really like that idea. But those are the key things I'd like to look at, is as Tanner said, the buffer strips, the sizes of the systems, and making them more friendly for pollinators.
So the other recent thing that's come up that I remember that was not discussed previous, I think was the battery. What was the
Battery storage?
Battery storage. What was the impact there?
We don't have any battery storage.
Not yet.
Well, NewGen, who owns the 2 systems that are online, the Pleasant Street and the Chase Road systems, had received a grant from the state to install battery backups, but they needed to up the panels on their system on Chase Road to install it. So these are large-scale lithium batteries. It's essentially what you would find in your cell phone, but shipping
Size of
container
this
size.
room. Yeah.
And so what they are is they were between the array and the grid, and they would store the power and they would meter out to the grid at a predetermined interval to allow for there to be continuous power in coming from the array throughout all hours, and not have it loading when maybe people weren't using it. And they would also store the power, so that in the event that the grid went down, it could draw from those batteries. I have not heard from NewGen in 18 months, probably since they were here. I talked to them maybe within the month after they were here. The woman who I had been working with from NewGen, who was sort of leading that project, has left the company. I reached out to her for something else, a question about some maintenance on their site, and was told she's no longer there. So I don't know if they have put this on another site that they own, or if they just gave the money back and said, we can't do this because part of the issue was they didn't have adequate land to meet the 200-foot setback and install the additional panels they needed. So they were exploring other options for land lease and purchase, and I don't know if those fell through or what.
So basically, it'd be another eyesore where those 3 poles are required between the array and the...
Well, I don't think so.
Well, I mean, if they're going to be container-sized batteries...
They're probably going to be in containers.
Right.
So, I mean, I don't see why those can be required to be buffered as well.
Yeah.
I mean, shipping containers aren't, I mean, they're not glamorous, but they're also not terribly difficult to hide.
True.
I mean, either with fence or, and I imagine they would be within whatever security fence they install for the array, because
Okay,
I don't think they want anybody in there screwing around with them.
probably not.
And then also require a security fence for everything.
Yes. We did, didn't we?
Pretty
It's
sure.
within the fenced-in area.
Well, I don't know if we require one or everyone has just installed one because that's how you build these things. I would have to look through the bylaw a little bit more closely, but everybody puts one up because, and clearly they're not 8-foot fence with razor wire, but most people
I
can
was,
top a
I
6-foot
mean,
fence.
we just were talking about the pollinator habitat, and I was working on, it was actually a rail trail project, and now for erosion control, they require a break in the silt fence every, I think it's 100 feet, to allow turtles to get by the silt fence. And I'm thinking to myself, all these chain link fences we put up everywhere, like that's the perfect obstacle for wildlife, you know? In terms of, you know, here we talk about connectivity on the Saliba property.
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about putting the fence up.
Well, I just didn't know if we had regulations that require the fence, or if they're just naturally doing
They're
that,
naturally just doing that.
figuring that, and they want to protect their investment. And I think,
What they don't want is someone roaming through the array.
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, if somebody really wants to get in there, they're gonna get over any fence that I've seen them put up, but,
The coyotes usually dig a tunnel under the fence.
and deer will generally jump over them.
Yeah.
You know, all the rodents just climb through them.
So I'd also like to follow up on a comment that you made. Our existing infrastructure was impacted by the installation of these large-scale solar facilities in the manner that there were people who had purchased panels for their roof, and because of lack of capacity of our existing infrastructure, we're not allowed to utilize them. We're not allowed to hook up, and there was a great expense.
Well, yes, but my comment on infrastructure was more real estate based in terms of what uses that land will support. In other words, if we have sewer on a street, it supports certain uses a lot better, like a car wash or a restaurant, than an area where you need private septic.
True.
And the utilities aren't us, unfortunately.
True.
So, we've got the water and the sewer, but Unitil, like it or not, owns the rest. So,
All right. Well, thank you for this new information.
Yeah, and I should have the buffer stuff for you for the November 25 meeting.
Anything further? Okay. So, the master plan is next. Larissa, did you get a nice bound copy?
I did.
Excellent.
The board asked to put this on to review what was hoped to be updated and moved forward with the money that we've received. We talked about the potential of requesting additional funding. I don't know that I've gotten a clear sense from the board that they want to or don't want to.
Well, open space did just update all of our maps.
We have our open space plan that was conditionally approved that we're actually working on. We received feedback from the state on some things we need to add or change, really things that they would like us to add. So we're working on that right now, but we anticipate, once we submit that, we'll have a fully approved open space plan. So my understanding, and Adam, correct me if I'm wrong, there's 7 elements besides the goals. I mean, the goals is an element as well, but I'm talking about the individual components. There's the land use, housing element, economic development, natural and cultural resources, open space and recreation, services and facilities, and circulation.
You said housing?
Yeah.
Okay. That sounds correct.
So my question is, when we look at the open space and recreation element, is that essentially complete based on our open space plan?
Yes.
And the other thing is the economic development element. If we look at what MRPC did, and I think I had asked you a while ago, is the data in MRPC, from the census that they used, is that relevant today? And I think you said yes.
It is, because it's 2019, not
Right.
2023.
Right.
I mean, we'll have a new census next year, if they decide to do it. But even if we said, we're going to hold off and we're going to do it in 2020 because then we'll have a new census, we won't see any of that data till, the earliest mid-2022.
2022, 23.
And, the real hard, deep data we won't see until, 23, 24 almost.
Right.
We can use American Community Survey, which is blended average of 5 years of sample data. It's not as comprehensive as the decennial census. It's done by the Census Bureau, and it's a great tool for interim. So we could do something where we updated some of the data by adding in ACS data for...
Not a complete...
Correct. And we could do something also where we go through the state and get some of the unemployment data and some of the other economic indicators that the state does annually. So there is data that can be updated, but some of the more meaty stuff is going to stay pretty much the same. I think what I would caution is that some of the conclusions and some of the anecdotal parts of that should be relooked at.
Right.
Because we're in a different place in 2019 than we were in 2014.
Yeah, right.
In so many different ways, but I think that there's a good framework there to build off of. And I think that the recommendations that are in there, while thoughtful, could be less amorphous and more specific and more task-oriented.
Yep.
I think there's some really rubber meets the road stuff that we could put in there that is a little more than what might be in there now.
Okay.
So we had a housing production plan in 2014. Did we accept that? That's included in our open space now? In our master plan?
No, because you'd be rewriting a chapter. You'd be using that, you'd be changing that slightly to fit in. Again, we could build a housing chapter off of that.
Okay.
It would not be out of place to do so. And again, I think supplementing some of that with some of the new data would be beneficial. We've grown significantly in that time period.
And we had at least one, I think, 2 Woody Bees.
We had one that has been constructed, and
The other one is
I'm
approved.
sorry, I can't hear you, Matt.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we had the Whalum Luxury
Was
right?
constructed.
Was constructed, and we've also approved the one on Howard Street. Since
Well, that wasn't a 40B. That wasn't a
Oh,
CAP
that's-
permit.
Well, okay, it seemed like it.
And the Hollis Hills project has expired.
It has expired.
It was approved in 2016. Comprehensive permits have a 3-year shelf life per the regulations, even predating 2007. So in speaking with council, he was pretty confident that it had passed its usable date. Because the Permit Extension Act did not, it specifically excluded comprehensive permits.
Anybody recently seen it advertised? And is it still being advertised?
It's still
with a
advertised,
permit?
I don't know if it
I
was
don't know
with
if it
a
has a
permit, but
No, when I saw it advertised, it was ready to build.
Well, and it has been advertised that way, and I've spoken to at least 2, if not 3, individuals who are interested in it, and have expressed my position that I question the validity of the permit at this point.
Okay.
And I had one who was absolutely certain it was still valid. I had one who wanted to change it anyway because he felt the values of for sale were too low, and the third just kind of said, "Oh, okay, thanks."
So the big question is whether we do some of this with the funding we have, which is the $50,000 that was approved by town meeting, or whether we wait for another round of grant funding, is that?
Or ask for another 50,000 from town meeting.
Personally, I'd like to see us make some progress before we ask for additional money.
That's fine. I think what I would put out to the board is that the community facilities and services and circulation are 2 elements that absolutely have to be done by somebody who doesn't work for the town.
Agreed.
Circulation, because we don't have the expertise to do that. And the facilities and services, because having a third party come in and say the hard things that need to be said can be easier to swallow. And not that there's necessarily anything hard that has to be said, but if there are things that are pointed out, being done by a third party is sometimes a little easier.
So that follows along well with the walkability studies that have been done recently. I have to mention it again, is that we've got over $1 million, not less than $1 million in a bond bill granted to us last year from the state of Massachusetts. So we need, for streetscapes and building facades on Lancaster Ave, Leominster Road, and Main Street, we have the L&M gas station, which I'm really not sure why we got a bond bill grant for, because we don't own it yet. Apparently, I don't know, that seems to be up in the air. And then the third thing was a community kitchen. So I think that at least something in here should address that, and we've got 4 more years to come up with a plan and present it.
So can you just back up? What did we get?
There was a bond bill.
We didn't get anything.
We didn't get
Put
anything.
in the bond bill.
It was put in it was a $50 million bond bill,
Okay.
distributed throughout to specific communities.
Okay.
I can follow up with the, it's in the law. I forget exactly.
It's in the bond, but
So Lunenburg has 1 million,
Not less than $1 million to be,
and what, can you just go through what it's for again?
streetscapes and building facades, the
Yeah.
L&M gas station, and a community kitchen.
now, that funding could never be released as well.
Right.
So-
But it will never be released if we don't come
we
up
don't
with
do-
some kind of a
do
plan.
that. Correct.
So that should be the end of that conversation.
Where would streetscapes fall? Would that be the circulation element? No.
Could be
What would that
sidewalks, could be, I don't think it could be paving on the roads, but it could be creation of sidewalks, improvement of crosswalks.
Well, usually streetscaping is an economic development or a transportation-based improvement. Streetscape could be sidewalk, street tree, street furniture, all that kind of stuff. and that's usually done through some sort of transportation element.
Well, because circulation says circulation element which provides an inventory of existing and proposed circulation and transportation systems.
Correct. So, I mean, some of the
Okay.
streetscaping could fall in there. It's also an economic development tool where you make a place look nicer, businesses
Make
want to
people
locate
wanna
there,
go there.
people want to be there. And, you know, we see this now on Electric Ave. I mean,
Excuse me.
the storage unit built its facility, and whatever you think of it, I mean, they built a decent facility, they keep it well. Then Unitil built their facility, so then you see Proctor build a gas station, he upgrades his building and moves it, the gas station builds. Now, all of this isn't just because someone built a storage unit, but people are willing to invest as other people are willing to invest. So, the streetscape has that same sort of effect. So and that kind of thing could fall into both of those elements. And especially if you're talking, you know, there was a lot of talk in the previous master plan about downtown and coming up with a village plan for downtown, which we've done. But we've laid the groundwork from a regulatory perspective to allow people to increase their use of this area. We've seen people do so to a limited degree, and would some of these elements bolster that in ways, you know, and call back to what Matt was talking about earlier, the walkability study. We have tons and tons of sidewalk here, and none of them really connect. So does connecting all of that, you know, anyone who's ever played SimCity, do people start going places now because you can, you know, they're not hitting the end of the sidewalk and turning around and going back. Oh, I can now walk this loop. Now that I've walked this loop, oh, look, this is here, and those kind of things start to build desire for people to be in places.
Well, there again, in a rural community, not everyone needs a sidewalk to decide to go for a walk. I mean, I used to walk back and forth from school a couple miles, and I don't think I ever hit a sidewalk. But
I agree, not everybody needs a sidewalk,
But
there are areas that would benefit from.
And where they are, they should be connected.
Correct, and, you know, the area where everything's a little bit more dense, and everybody drives through, and you want to bring people to, having more sidewalks makes it easier for people to connect to all the little things that are around there. You know, and who knows how long we're going to be in two buildings. There isn't an easy way to walk from the Ritter Building to Town Hall. I mean, there is, but in the winter, you're walking through the snow, or you're walking in the middle of the
Or in
road.
the middle of the road, right.
And some people don't mind that, but some people can't or won't walk through the snow.
No, and if you're in a wheelchair, you can't.
Correct, yeah.
So,
So if we have $50,000, we have an anticipated budget of about $12,500 for each element. Now, that would be from a ground-up element, so some of these ones are
we're gonna come in last.
going to come in less. And that's numbers, educated estimate from MRPC. So if we use another consultant, those prices could be different. But 100,000 is not an unusual number for a master plan.
In my circles, I've heard that's a low estimate these days.
Probably is these days. Everything gets more expensive.
So we know we need the services and facilities element, and we know we need the circulation element.
Well, and my only thought on the facilities and services element is I feel like we have a lot of information along those lines. I mean, Vertex and TAP A, and, I mean, we've done a lot of that analysis to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars.
Well, but those are limited to the buildings within downtown.
I understand that, but they address where most of our infrastructure is, and in terms of needs, I think they focus on the 5 buildings or 7 buildings, however you want to quantify it, that people talk about most.
But this isn't about what people talk about most, it's about everything. So public safety, DPW, parks, schools.
I'm just looking at it from a standpoint of, like, public safety, that building's 15 years old. It doesn't pop up on my radar as being a...
That was only 10. I thought it was 8.
Okay. Yeah, I think it actually, I was on the finance committee when we got the first electric bill, and that was '04.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it came online in '04, or was shortly thereafter, but, the primary school, relatively new building, we just built out the middle high school, so I feel like a lot of the study material that we've got fills that gap, and, you know, I challenge the thought that we need a consultant to tell us this information, because we've had a lot of consultants over the years advise the town on various different things, and ultimately, it all comes down to what gets done at town meeting. You can have the best consultant in the world prepare the best presentation, but if the community doesn't support what the consultant has come up with, it's going nowhere. And I think our own boards are the best reflection of what's going on in the community. You know, the old saying is a consultant is someone you spend a bunch of money with to tell you what you already know. Because you know your business better than anybody else, because you work in the building, you talk to the teachers, you talk to the police, you talk to the fire, I mean, you know these buildings inside and out. I'd like to see us invest the $50,000 and produce a tangible result. And, so, in my mind, doing more studies, does not help us produce a tangible result. You know, and one thing that I picked up on in the master plan as I was gleaning over it was they reference basically a steering committee between the planning board, the selectmen, and the finance committee to help build consensus across those 3 groups, because those 3 groups have the biggest impact on all of this stuff, and I wish we had it. So.
I agree that we don't need necessarily a study on those particular buildings. I think we've studied them. I think where we haven't done is we haven't reached out to public participation. I think that's what's been lacking, is I think the community is not aware of all of the options. I think looking at some of what other towns have done for master planning is public visioning is a critical part of any master plan. And looking at what Bloxborough did, I think is a really good example of involvement with the community, and they had very good attendance at their public visioning, and it talks about things like, you know, what's your favorite place in town, how do you get around, why did you move here, and what keeps you here, and they did simple things to get people to answer that. You know, how do you get around? They had sticky notes that people everybody was given a dot when they came in, and they put the dot on the picture of how they get around. They had Post-it notes and posters that asked things. They would ask a question, and then people put their responses on Post-it notes and stuck it on the board. I mean, it was pretty basic tools that they used, but they gained a lot of information and a lot of public feedback. To me, services and facilities goes way beyond the 5 buildings, and I actually want to back up to something you said earlier in the meeting. You said that there's a symposium on growth.
Yes.
That you're attending. What is that?
The finance committee had requested through the Board of Selectmen and the, the school committee to look back at growth data over the past 10 years and potentially forward over the coming 10 years to try and determine trends or
So trends strictly on school population trends on
the community in general. So myself, the town manager, and the superintendent will be presenting,
And when is this? Because I think the planning
Tomorrow
board, this is
evening at 6:30.
information that's pretty,
I believe the planning board was included on the original invitation from the finance chair.
no,
I was.
I was not.
I would have to look again. I thought all the members of the
When is it? Tomorrow?
6:30 at
Where?
the middle high school auditorium.
Prelude to the town meeting.
Well, I mean, this is a critical part of our master plan. I mean, so this data certainly plays into the master plan.
It does.
And when we talk about facilities and services, personally, and I said this when the high school was built, we're going to outgrow these schools before they're even built. You know, with our population explosion and the development that's going on, this is a key component of our facilities, not only our town facilities, but our school facilities. So, you know, to me, it's not just our town buildings, it's our parks, it's our sewer, it's our water, it goes well beyond the buildings. And forecasting needs, so for example, with our aging population, when the Council on Aging talks about the aging population in Lunenburg in comparison to Burst, that's going to affect the needs of our facilities moving forward. That affects walkability, that affects transportation needs, all of it's interconnected. So to me, it goes well beyond the 5 buildings, but I take the point of studying those 5 buildings again. We have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, but to me, I don't think we involved the public enough. We had, the selectmen had a couple symposiums that I went to, they were at the school, and the people that went there were very active participants, but I don't think they were very widely publicized. I don't think that there was a great effort to get people out, and I think that's what we have to do.
And I think visioning, the
visioning is key.
is the cornerstone of the entire master plan.
Absolutely.
And that's the critical component to start with, is getting everybody, getting people.
As many people.
As many people as possible to participate in creating that vision, and then basing recommendations and analysis off of that, and how to get to where those people want. And, you know, looking at the community facilities and services in this master plan, it's rather different than some of the other ones that I've worked on and been a part of. And usually those involve speaking with and looking at each department, how those departments operate, what services they offer, what services they maybe should or could be offering, and making recommendations on how to provide services that support the vision that's being outlaid. So it's not even just about the physical infrastructure, it's about the programmatic infrastructure that the municipal government provides through its departments that are ultimately housed in these buildings, but more about how those programs inform, assist, uplift the population and help it achieve the universal community goals that it's sort of expressed.
Do we want facilities for an aging population? Do we want facilities for you know, teenagers? Do we want, what does our community want?
Well, and even more so, how can we provide programs,
How can we
or what
provide it?
programs might be provided that service these things, and
Exactly.
what, you know,
Multi-use areas, yeah.
I mean, the police have a great school resource officer program. Is it enough? Probably not. What would it look like if it were enough? Here's recommendations on maybe we need to grow that, and maybe here's some ways or funding that would help grow that.
Exactly. So to me, the visioning component is key. As you said, it's the cornerstone.
No, you're not talking about the vision, right? You're talking,
A visioning session, the public visioning, and to me, it's going to be more than just one meeting. Maybe it's a couple of the same meeting, but really to get feedback from the community on what they want to see in the master plan. Where do they, because the master plan really drives where the town goes over the next 10, 20 years. And that, it's really your roadmap. And I think the citizens are the people that should come up with the roadmap. And then our charge is to develop a plan that follows that roadmap.
I mean, I feel like the town's done and when I say the town, I mean the Board of Selectmen, and all the other related boards, I think they've done a fairly good job of trying to reach out. Unfortunately, sometimes you just don't get the participation, but I know they've done building tours of Town Hall and Old Primary, and there was a charrette at the new middle high school, and one here, and, so I don't think there's been no outreach. There has been some, but the feedback I look at with the most respect is town meeting. And I'm trying not to infer too much based on simple votes, but you take Old Primary, for example, because I know it's come up at least 2, if not 3 town meetings for demolition, conveyance, repurposing, and each time people have voted to not sell the property and not demo the property. We'll see what comes up this town meeting, because it's on again to be demoed.
This one's for repair.
This one's for repair. I thought it was for demo.
I think there's a citizen, oh, maybe I'm mistaken.
I think the town's article is to demo it, and then there's another citizen petition to,
Actually, I don't think that went anywhere.
but regardless of how you feel about that particular building, I just look at town meeting and say, there's a resounding answer here that we don't want to sell that parcel of land for whatever reason, and there's some affection for the building. And again, I don't want to infer too much, but, we spent a lot of money on the Vertex study. If we went to town meeting and said we want to study these buildings and hire Vertex to go out and give us a thorough analysis, and based on that analysis, we're going to take the 2 buildings that score the best and vacate them, I don't think anybody would have supported the study. But that's essentially what has happened. Town Hall and Ritter scored the best on the Vertex, and we're moving forward to vacate both of those buildings. And so, I don't know, it's a challenge. I mean, I look at the Vertex money that was spent and said, that was money well spent in terms of getting a good feeling for what's going on in the buildings, but I think the hard news that we got delivered was the buildings that we thought weren't that great actually scored the best, and the buildings that we thought might be the best scored the worst.
I think you're getting bogged down in one particular building or one particular thing, and we're not talking about just the municipal buildings. We're talking about the town as a whole and all the services of the town. And what I heard at town meeting, and I've been at all the town meetings when these votes have come up, is that there isn't a plan. And to me, it comes to, because the town is looking for a comprehensive plan to me, the town is crying for a master plan. And to me, that talks about the services, the facilities, gives the rationale behind the decisions that have been made, what makes the most sense. And I agree the selectmen tried to do charrettes, but I think that was targeted on one issue, and it was based on municipal buildings, but it didn't talk about all the other things that we were talking about: services, walkability, transportation needs, recreational facilities. I think we've got to look at the whole thing as a whole, not strictly just at the Vertex study or the other studies, but the community as a whole, which is what a master plan does. So when we talk about services and facilities, will it take into account those other studies? Absolutely. Will it take into account the town meeting votes on all of these issues? Absolutely. But it will broaden the picture, and hopefully, with the public's input, flesh out a plan that makes sense going forward without redoing the existing studies. In no way am I proposing that we do that.
So are these 2, the Vertex and the Tape, are those both readily available on the town website?
I believe they are. If not, I can get copies of them.
I don't think we need hard copies as well.
No, I can get you a digital file.
That would be great.
They should be available on the TCP Building Design Committee page on the website. If they aren't already there.
Yeah.
I know the town manager was working on getting those 2 documents up there.
I think they were up on the website, and when the website got flipped over, they
Disappeared somehow.
I don't know if
Didn't
they got
get
pushed off
linked or
to a
whatever.
different link of files, but, yeah, I can find those.
Yeah. And I don't mean to focus my discussion on one particular building. I want to have a broad sense of what's going on. I just feel like in the last few years, these buildings have been a hot topic, and for our purposes, I think we need to not ignore all the other aspects, but just keep that in mind.
Answer
that-
some of those questions.
I'm just looking to pick the low-hanging fruit. We've got to start somewhere, and I feel like, that's a place to start. And I know for Paula, the visioning is the critical element. For me, being able to coordinate with the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen is the critical element, because without that cooperation, we're going to be in gridlock. You can't get this stuff done. We can write the best master plan, but if we're not going to have the cooperation of the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to inform and help move the process forward, then we're not going anywhere. So,
And there's a couple of things to that. I mean, the master plan is the plan. It's what we'd like to do, what we think is in the best interest, and it should be designed as a flexible document, that here's where we want to go, here's, our goal would be some large nebulous thing that we want to do, and the objectives to get to that goal are a series of things that we can achieve in short, medium, and long term. And, this goes back to what I've said from the beginning, is I like master plan committees, because you draw in people from all sorts of disciplines who can provide input from their committee's perspective and go and sort of solicit buy-in from those larger groups. And the other thing is that even if everybody buys in now, all of those committees could turn over in a period of time, and the people who are then there could say, well, that's great, I'm glad that this group bought in, but now we're, I mean, I think we've seen this over the last 4 or 5 years here in town. Committees, Board of Selectmen, Finance Committee are changing, they're evolving, the people who are involved are different. Things are adjudicated and looked at in different ways. So the master plan should be something that people can look at and say, well, the majority of people wanted this sort of thing, and this is the recommendation that would get us to that sort of thing. We don't maybe like that, but we can take that and we can get there in a different way that sort of mirrors this. The other thing is, as we sit here and talk about it, we're talking about where are we going. That's what the master plan is. We want to get to 2040. How do we get there? And what does it look like? Well, we don't have any really valid projections. The population projections we currently have us losing about 7 to 10% of our population by next year, which is absurd.
Yeah.
So, the most recent federal numbers we have us having just over 11,000 people. The projections we have for 2020 from the Regional Planning Agency have us having 10,400 people in 2020.
Right, and we've brought that up in
Yeah,
the
and-
MRPC
and-
meetings, because they didn't base it on build-out. They based it on, current zoning, and with the 40Bs that we've had, we've seen an incredible influx of population.
And there's been some of that, and some of it is, I think, also what we're seeing is, as our population gets older, they're a smaller family living in a large house that's turning over to a larger family moving into a larger house. And so while someone either passes away or moves out, it's 1 or 2 people, and they're bringing in 3, 4, 5, 6 people. So there's some of that as well, and the numbers bear that out in some ways.
Right, but I know when the school was being built, we looked at the MRPC numbers, and
And that's part of the problem is MSBA.
They didn't include any of the Tri-Town. They
Yes.
didn't include Emerald Place. None of those were in the projections for school-age
And
population.
MSBA won't let you do
And
anything
they won't let them
that-
because they weren't built yet.
Yeah.
But that's one of the issues that I think we're experiencing in the school system.
Yeah, and schools are a big part of it. I mean,
Absolutely.
they're a huge part of the budget, and they also
Require space.
are probably the biggest service the citizens have in town. You know, so,
Certainly financially.
yeah. So,
So what do? Do we draft an RFP for some components? Do we revisit this discussion again?
I think the board needs to decide what components they want to, I think they need to rank the components in orders of what you want to achieve first. And then build the RFP off of that. So I don't know if you all want to ruminate on that and have this discussion again in November, or if you want to try and create that list now.
I know I did it already, because I think we've gone through this before. But if we want to bring it up in November and have everybody bring back their ranking and talk about it, that's fine too.
I mean, I leave it to you four.
I think the key thing for me, and not to beat a dead horse here, is I feel like we need to focus on getting some consensus built between us and primarily the Board of Selectmen, but I think the Finance Committee should also be involved, because ultimately all of this stuff comes down to what we can afford to do. And I would like to develop a comprehensive plan that you can go to town meeting with and, you know, gain some support with, and, you know, come back and modify it as necessary based on whatever feedback you get from the community along the way. But ultimately, you can only do what the town can afford to fund. And I remember when the last 3 buildings came online, it was just before the real estate market declined in '07. And, you know, we ended up closing town offices on Friday because we couldn't afford to staff them. We ended up cutting the library's budget, so they were open reduced hours, or I think they cut a librarian. And some of those services never came back. And so I feel like, you know, we're kind of in the same economic environment, and at some point the real estate market is going to decline. And, you know, even as it sits today, when we go to town meeting, the school budget did not get what they requested initially. I think they requested like 3.5%. They got 2.5 or 3.
I think they requested like 6, and then they came back with 3.5. And I also think that the master plan isn't necessarily about affording anything.
Right.
It's about, and I understand your point, and I understand that it doesn't make sense to take things to town meeting that won't be funded or can't be funded.
Yeah, and I don't mean to say, you know, we're only going to do what the Finance Committee says we can afford to do, because obviously we're all working off of, you know, our best forecast of what the future holds. But I just look at it in terms of, we have a lot of new growth coming in each year. We have a lot of new buildings coming online, and we're using that new growth to fund additional personnel at the public safety building. We're using it as quickly as it comes in. We're levying to 2.5 every year. We're using all of the funds we have, and, you know, we've put some money aside in stabilization funds and so on. So I don't mean to paint the devil on the wall, but I feel like if we could build some consensus and get a direction between the Board of Selectmen and the Finance Committee, we can actually turn some of this stuff into product and results. And that doesn't cost us $1.
So I'm glad that Adam brought it up. This is not the time to be looking to what we can afford. This is the time to be looking to what this town needs. Now, I can remember in the recent past, a couple of overrides. I think the first one was not a debt exclusion, and the second one was?
I don't. The school was a debt exclusion.
Regardless, they were both for schools.
Yep.
The schools do not ask, what can you afford? They say, we need this. Well, they also take 2/3 of the entire town's budget and spend it. And like you said, 2.5% every year. I think that a lot of groups in town say, well, we've got 2.5% increase over what we had last year. What can we spend it on? That's not the way to run a town. You're not supposed to have DPW, who's in charge of all your buildings and 100 miles of roads, getting a couple $100,000, and then whatever they can pick out of the capital plan. That just doesn't make any sense to me. That's exactly what I see this as being for. This is the opportunity to say, look, everybody wants something more than we can have, we can afford, because we can't afford much. But in the next 10 years, we have to focus, we have to try to be able to manage to afford these things for the benefit of the town as a whole. I mean, if you've got horrible, rotten, potholed streets, and you've got the best schools, and you've got the most kids, you can't get to the school. If you've got, you've got the greatest recreation, but you can't afford police. Okay, well, how safe do you feel recreating? There are certain things that need to get attention, just as there are other certain things that need to get attention. And this I see as the time to focus on the town as a whole. That's all. I don't think that this is the time to be saying, well, we can't afford that.
And to flesh out the priorities based on the townspeople's feedback.
Exactly. Exactly. So, I don't know, that's my 2 cents.
So what are we gonna do?
I thought we were trying to figure out how to spend that 50 grand. No, I think I think it came out that we need to show some positive results by spending some of it and getting buy-in and gaining consensus among governing groups and citizen groups. I think it would be nice to have a culmination of all the outreaches and the charrettes and the visionings and the walkabilities and the town buildings. I mean, the town buildings tour a couple of years ago, there was, I would say, over 30 people. Paula was there,
There was
wasn't
easily
There was
35
almost
people
40.
there.
Yeah. And the visioning center we had in this room before that, I think, the summer before that, there was a huge number of people that showed up
I
for
think about the
that.
same, 40 or 50, I think.
And then
But
the,
out of a population of 11,000.
oh yeah.
So that's,
How many do we get
I
at
mean-
town meeting, though?
How many vote?
400?
right,
No way.
right.
We get 200 if we're lucky.
If we're lucky.
Yeah, if we can keep 200. The key
Put a
is keeping the
taxation on it.
200.
Well,
yeah.
Put a tax.
But I mean, on average, we're probably between 100 and 225.
Right, exactly. I was going to say between 100 and 200.
So we got a quarter of town meeting to attend.
Which is pretty good.
I mean,
I would like to see, I know when the school was, I look at what the school did. When the school was doing the building plan, they used the cafeterias, and those cafeterias were full. They had sessions where it was full.
But
And they
that's a
also-
single issue thing.
I understand
and the
that, but
schools
the
are a little
single
more
issue right
glamorous.
now is the master plan and where we see Lunenburg in 10 years or 20 years. That's and I know years ago, I mean, I've lived here for 34 years, and I know back, when we did Marion used to do some of the visiting sessions, they were very heavily populated, and a couple of them took place in the auditorium. How do we do that? I don't know, but I'd like to see us get back to that kind of involvement. And my hope is that when we put out this to bid and we do this RFP, and I've looked at the RFPs put out by other communities, is whatever consultant assists us with this is going to have some ideas about how to get attendance up and how to do a visioning session, because that's critical for any element. So, I'm hoping that when we do this RFP, when we get the responses, we're gonna vet them well enough so that we get the best bang for our buck and somebody who's gonna help us get involvement. So, I mean, I have a priority list, but I don't know if everybody wants to go through the 7 elements and look at the data that's available and then come back next meeting with their priority list, and then we can really determine what we want to put an RFP out for. I mean, to me, we have $50,000. I'd like to get something for that $50,000.
Well, we just tonight commissioned an economic development committee,
Yeah,
so that should fall towards the bottom of the list.
I agree.
We've got the open space and recreation, natural and cultural pretty much wrapped up with our recent open space plans.
Well, the natural and cultural, does that fall in, is that included in the open
It's
space
separate,
plan?
but-
I think it's separate, but
Well,
can you pull out?
it's two, but usually the open space plan will cover both of those chapters. And our open space plan is fairly extensive, and I'd want to look and just compare, but I think that they've got most of the stuff you would need for that in there.
Okay,
And I want to read through the recommendations again, but I think they even made some reasonable recommendations that you could say are cultural.
okay.
I mean, they certainly address the natural habitat throughout the plan.
They talk about habitat, but I'm just concerned about the cultural resources, and I'm not sure about
I
that.
mean, they have the historic homes, the historic buildings listed in there. That's the kind of stuff that really, we don't have a lot of cultural resources. We have some, but we're not Lexington, we're not Concord, we're not Boston. So, really, we're just trying to touch on the things that make Lunenburg, and
Right.
and
Well-
they do, the open space plan does delve into some of that.
Right, I mean, I'd want to reach out, as Tanner said, I mean, reaching out to the other boards and committees, like absolutely Finance Committee and Selectmen, but in that thing, the Art and Cultural Council would be a key component.
Yeah, and I would also reach out to the Historical Society.
Right, so Historical Society, and, so we can certainly use parts of those to build on the open space, but I think there are other
There are other things that we would.
other
yeah.
committees that we want to
Yes.
include.
So considering that bond bill and all the outreach that we had up to this point, fairly recent, I would think that the community facilities and services would rank pretty high on the itemized.
That's my number one.
The sooner we got something like that embodied, the sooner we would be more readily prepared to present some sort of plan.
Right. And to me, number two is the population density, because that directly relates to your services and your facilities. So the land use element identifies land use, but it also designates the distribution, location, and interrelationship on public and private land, and relates the proposed standards of population density and building intensity to land. So I think that's key, because knowing where your population is going, what your land uses are going to, is key in understanding what your facilities are and what your facility needs are. So to me, those two are intertwined. Because understanding your population trends and your land use trends is going to determine what your facility needs are going to be. And then the housing element. Now, we have I think you said we have a 2014 housing production plan, but I don't know that that takes into account all of the building that's been going on. If we look at the development in Whalum that was just built, on Whalum Road.
It was
Women's
included in
development
there
and
because it
things.
was approved at the time.
But it changed significantly since what it was approved at.
Correct, but I think at the time that was finalized, they were in the public hearings for the change.
So
I
those are
think
things we'd have to go
it-
back and look
Yeah,
at.
if I'm remembering correctly, the 120 units was accounted for as
Okay.
part of that.
So we may have that already.
But, again, there is some work to be done there.
Well, if it was before the revision, then those 120 units would have been single and duplex homes.
Yeah, it was
Rather than
75.
rather than 5 towers.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, so look,
So
we need to, it
that's a
could
little
have
different.
changed significantly. So we need to look at that, and then we may or may not need to do it. And then the circulation element, if we want to look at the streetscapes and some of the things that you talked about under the bond bill, we need to do that. So those would be my top right now, and I don't think we have money for any more.
So what I would suggest is that we individually review and itemize and detail and think and scheme and plan on your own, and then we'll come back to it next month.
If you want to send them to me before the meeting,
You can put it together.
individually, I can put together a matrix that shows what people ranked things as, so that we can look at it quickly and say, look, 3 of the 5 people have this rank number 1,
Yeah.
3 of the 5 have this rank number 7, everybody has this rank number 8, so we can move that right off, and it'll just we still have to discuss it publicly, but it gives you the chance to come in that night and have it in front of you and just start to dissect it a little bit easier.
Yeah, I know you sent it out before. I'm looking at, I'm looking at Chapter 81D, but can you just send out the component list again? So that everybody has a fresh list? And giving an overview of what each element does?
Yeah, I'll send out the text of 81D, I'll send out the housing production plan, and I'll get the vertex and TAP A and send them out.
Okay, awesome.
Super.
I mean, I agree with that list. I think at the end of the day, the rest of the details will come out in the RFP in terms of what we're looking for specifically for the consultant to work into these
Sure.
elements and,
And honestly, what you're looking for them to work in is gonna kind of get borne out when you start working with them. Really, what I think you probably want to do, and we'll talk with the town manager about this since she's our procurement professional, but you want to decide what you want for qualifications from the consultant. You want to do the RFP in a way that you pick qualified consultants and then you interview them. And you may find that you get 5 responses and these are our 3 most qualified, let's interview them. And the one who on paper is least qualified, but still qualified, you like the best, and you're like, no, we want to work with that person. Because they get it, they're right where we want to be, and it's always interesting to me to see how different it is to see someone in person than it is on paper for these kind of things.
And you had sent out sample RFPs. I know I have mine.
Yeah, I can send those out again.
Because I
Yeah.
know she doesn't have them.
And I'll send you guys a link. I think it was the town of Boxborough. They did not do a paper master plan. They did
it
a
all
website.
electronic, yeah.
And they had an executive summary that they printed out and had around town, and it referenced back to the website.
Yeah.
And, different place, different community, but I think that's something that we may want to think about or look at what the reality of that is, because having all that information, someone says, oh, what do you think about this? Oh, let's read the master plan. It gets, a lot of people go, oh, well, I don't really care what you think anymore. And so sometimes just that, 20-page executive summary, someone can whip through, oh, I want to dig more into that, and they can go find that information. But that's something I think we can probably talk with the consultants about after the board talks amongst itself and sees what the general consensus on that is.
Good. We good with that? Super. So minutes approval is next.
So the agenda says 10-1. I got the minutes of 10-7.
It's probably a typo. Oh, Tim,
yeah, we met on the 7th, though.
you met on the 1st, too.
We did?
That was when Marissa was appointed, but I think you guys approved those minutes last time.
10
We
approved,
met,
yeah.
yeah, we approved those
Yeah.
on the 7th.
Yeah, because that was just one sentence, I think.
Yeah, it was.
So
Yep.
should we
So this
hold
should be
off
the
just
10-7.
for prudency?
Because it says minutes 10-1.
Yeah, I mean, you can, yeah. We'll put them on the next
We're
one.
not in any emergency, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll skip that, we'll move on to committee reports, capital planning, it's been over a month now, we're going to meet for the first 3 Tuesdays of next month, I believe. Stormwater Task Force, we met last Thursday. It was discussion about public outreach and what to do next, and we didn't really get a whole lot done, I don't think. Do you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
That sounds about right.
So there wasn't really much action there. Agricultural Commission met last week, and wait a minute. No, Task Force met this week. No, it's only Monday, last week, the week before the AgCom met. And we had the closeout on the farmers market report. There were over 30 vendors total for the season. I think it was over 25 full season vendors. We had 25 vendors on the first and the last Sunday. There was not one single Sunday we had less than 15 or 16 vendors, which is phenomenal improvement over past markets, and we hope to continue that movement. The discussion was had about the income from the market. The market revenues were twice what the expenditures were this year alone. The discussion came up that is it to make money for the AgCom, or is it to promote agriculture? And the resounding agreement was that it is in fact to promote agriculture, which kind of led to a discussion of not trying to monkey too much with the fees and the costs, at least in the short term. It was a very successful year, and now we've got the winter to prepare some discussions for promoting agriculture in the town of Lunenburg that is not to do with the farmers market. And hopefully we will have a busy winter at that. So that's the end of the AgCom. Passers Building Design Committee, that's me. That's you.
Yeah, so we had our initial meeting on the October 16th. It was a brief meeting we organized. And then we met again on the 23rd, and we're getting the process started to put together an RFP. The town manager is working on that. She should have something for us on that by December 4th. And at our next meeting, we are going to come up with some goals of the committee and try to put together the framework to work through the process. The goal right now is to get the RFP out and get engineering done and have something ready for Springtown meeting, but that's a pretty tight timeline.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, the article at town meeting awarded us $265,000 to go towards the engineering of that space. That's a lot of engineering to get done in a short period of time.
8.5 months.
Yeah, so we'll see where we end up with that, but we're getting started, so.
Excellent. The open space ad hoc.
It's Greg.
Land acquisition
as well.
So Paula, would you like to update us on
Oh, I'm
open
sorry.
space? That's right.
Open space, there's not a whole lot to say. I think I've said it at the last meeting. We're all working on the individual. We've divided up the work. We got a lot of feedback from the state on things that they wanted to see included. And so that's all been divided up, and we're all working on various components. So,
Super. Would you like to update us on land acquisition?
I actually have not been going to those meetings, so I can't.
Okay.
Other than we got the grants, and now there's the article on town meeting, so that's where we're at.
Forward motion. Green communities?
Oh, open space, I did want to tell you about Howard Street.
250?
Yeah, 250 Howard Street. They're taking it out of chapter, and so we are going to take a look at it. We actually have requested that we can go take a look at the land. So we're just, rather than just saying we're not interested, we wanted to at least look at it, so
Okay.
that's in process.
And that was already an offer, so it didn't have to
Yeah.
go out.
It doesn't need an appraisal. Planning board made no recommendation. I believe the selectmen pulled their warrant article for the funding, didn't they?
I'm not sure. I don't know.
I don't know.
It was 60,000 was the
60,000,
purchase
yeah,
price.
60,000.
Green Communities.
That's Greg.
And that's Greg. Apparently MRPC.
MRPC meeting was in October was canceled. The next meeting is November 7th, but I am not able to go because I'm going to one of the workshops at Endicott College on developing comprehensive plans. So I am going to the CPTC workshop at Endicott College in Dedham that night, so I will not be going to the MRPC meeting if someone else is able to attend. But that meeting is November 7th at 7 o'clock.
Now, Lunenburg still has a BOS member.
Yes.
Okay.
There's one member appointed by the selectmen and one member appointed by the planning board.
And did we get you to take the MJTC?
Nope.
No?
We still don't have an MJTC rep.
Oh. What say you?
The third Wednesday, is that what it is? It's a Wednesday meeting. Is it third, Tanner?
I thought they were both the first. I thought MRPC was the first Thursday and MJTC was the first Wednesday, but I could be wrong on that.
Honestly, I would be interested in switching because Thursdays are really tough for me. October, they were supposed to meet on October 9th. Next meeting's November 13th. So what is that, November 13th?
That's going to be the second Wednesday.
Yeah, so that's the second Wednesday.
We were both wrong, Adam.
Second.
Yeah.
Well, we split the middle.
And they meet at the Doyle Center over in Leominster?
Right. And MRPC meets the first Thursday.
And that's only once a month they meet?
Yeah,
Yeah.
each of those only meet once a month.
So if we were to fill the MJTC, we'd need a nomination and a second. And did I hear correctly that you want to switch?
I would prefer to do the MJTC than the MRPC, because Thursdays are, I have grandchildren on Thursdays, and that's really tough for me.
How could we
So
do
I
that?
would prefer Wednesdays.
She could just
I think.
resign, you could appoint her to MJTC, and if Marissa was willing, you could appoint her to MRPC. We'll send them a fancy little note
So I
that says
should
we did that.
send you a note, or can I just do
You
that
can just do
now?
that here, I mean,
Before we let you, we need to find out if she
Do you want to wait until next week and think about it?
Yeah, I just want to check my schedule because
We can go another meeting, I think, without...
Right, because I travel to Nashville a lot, and it's always, Mondays are usually free, but then it's usually Tuesday morning to Thursday night.
Okay.
Midnight, so,
Well, we'll take it up again next week,
Okay.
next meeting.
We don't have any business with MJTC right now. Like, there's no
We've got a
projects.
tip-
No.
We've got a tip
Well, the
thing we
tip
just
is in
finished up.
process,
The tip is in
so,
process,
I mean, MPO is the critical part of the tip, and I sat on the MJTC for a while. The MJTC makes recommendations,
They're
but they
advisory to
are
the MPO.
advisory to the MPO.
and I mean, really, we're kind of bottom of the barrel for MPO funding right now. 'cause
Oh, I
they just-
disagree.
Well, they just gave us a giant chunk.
Oh, no, you know what? That's not a giant chunk on the tip.
True.
That's the thing, is if you look at the funding that other communities are receiving for road improvement projects, we are not taking advantage of that funding. Honestly, the Summer Street project, was a large project, certainly not the largest on the tip. And it's based on region, and we haven't submitted anything else since. So Chase Road we did, which was a very small project.
Yeah, and that
in
was
the
a book
scheme of
job,
things.
basically.
It was a book job because it didn't, but we, very often, the MPO is looking to fill, a project may come in under bid, and then we're looking to fill a project for $500,000 because we have this funding, but we don't have a project. So I encourage the town to look at intersection improvements, paving
Federally eligible
projects.
roads.
And go through the process of getting it tip-ready, because very often, we're literally looking for projects to fill in those gaps. And the amount of funding that other communities take advantage of astounds me, and the fact that we don't baffles me.
We could look at the historical bridge on Holman Street, or we could be proactive with the intersection of Northfield and Chase Road.
There's a lot we could be doing.
Yeah.
I don't think Holman Street's
Honestly.
federal age eligible.
What is? All bridges,
Street?
all bridges. There's a bridge program.
Right.
The bridge program is separate from the tip money, and
Yes.
and it is considered a bridge, and it would fall
That's
under the
true,
bridge
yeah.
program.
And I think it's less
And there
than
is
10 feet.
plenty of funding available.
Is it a 10-foot bridge?
No, it's 25, it's a 25-foot span at least.
Okay. I didn't think it was
And I
that
think
much.
there's probably some geometric improvements that would need to be made in the approach on either side, but,
Sure.
I mean, it's a project the town couldn't fund.
I just,
Well, even the bridge on Townsend Harbor Road, we have money for bridge improvements that were approved under the capital plan. Townsend Harbor Road is a federal aid eligible road, and that bridge improvement can come under the bridge program. We don't need to fund it. So, the MPO was a committee that I was really glad to be involved with, because it really opened my eyes to what's available, and I truly don't believe that we take advantage the way that we could. But you're right, Matt, those kinds of improvements, intersection improvements, things like lines, things like stop signs, changing minor intersection improvements, they are literally pleading for those kind of jobs.
And all of our Ys to Ts that they want to change.
Absolutely. And the majority, I was amazed at how many federal aid eligible roads we have in town. I think it's something like 23 roads. I provided a list to the selectmen. And that's available on the Map It program. All you have to do to go is go to the MRPC website, click on the Map It program, and it will give you a list of every federal aid eligible road in town. So when we do paving projects and things like that, there is funding that we could be utilizing.
all right, that rounds out
You're
our...
the perfect person, Paula.
For what? For MJTC? The MJTC, I mean, I can't do MPO because it has to be a selectman. I was the MPO rep when we did the Summer Street project and the Chase Road project. Both of those projects were because I was sitting on the MPO and became aware of the funding.
All right, so we are finished committee reports, on to director's items.
Butterfly Lane, the Board of Selectmen voted to lay out Butterfly Lane, so it will be on the warrant for acceptance as a town road, which will garner great debate, I'm sure. Stone Farm, the Lascati Development Corporation has finished the outstanding items.
All of them.
They have.
Awesome.
I went out there today, and they did fill all of the edges of the pavement with compacted loam and seed. And, I mean, I don't think the seed's taken yet, but it will at some point, and it's filled and compacted. So I've got some photos that I'm going to send down to Jeff and see if he wants to come and take a look at it, or if he's satisfied from the photographs.
I would also like to reach out to the homeowners group that was here.
I actually, I ran into Lou Delasante at the Miles for Miles event, and we ran into John Romano when Jeff and I were out there doing the inspection, and they both were grateful and were happy with the work that had been done.
I do think we should just send them a letter, just so that we have it in the file that it was done.
So once I hear back from Jeff, I expect on our next meeting, there'll be a full bond release vote for the remaining $27,000 for Lascati.
Good, that'll save us some legal work.
Yep. And And RFPs and the whole 9 yards.
Yay, we're saving money left and right.
Special town meeting warrant article. The Board of Selectmen voted to support the earth removal bylaw, which is our only article. So, yay. I think they just want you guys to have it and not them. There were some general questions, nothing too large, and I think that we're in a good place with that. So that's what I've got.
All right, notice of communications have all been scanned to us. Meeting schedule, November 12th.
You guys wanted to
Town hall.
post, yep, 6, well, we're at the middle high school for that.
Oh, that's town meeting is, yep, middle high school. So we posted 6:45 for the 7 o'clock. And then the 25th, it looks like it's an open agenda.
As of right now. Many things can happen between now and then.
So the 25th, we should plan on having reviewed what we wanted to for the master plan, and come with numerical recommendations and potentially more discussion and backup for our thoughts. And anything else that we should be looking at for November 25th?
Do we want to try to do the solar, or do we not?
As I said, I'm going to try and get stuff out to you before then for the buffering, so we can at least have something to talk about on the buffering front.
I assume that the things that are on our items now, aside from the economic development, will be the land acquisition.
Land
probably won't be.
acquisition won't be,
No.
because the town meeting will have happened. Economic development you've done. I
Solar
don't have
bylaw,
any
master-
A&Rs, but I imagine that the A&Rs and the master plan will be the two things,
And then we'll decide.
and the MTC,
Yep.
MJTC rather.
And the MRPC, well, however that comes out. So we have reprieve from our next regularly scheduled meeting on the 11th, thanks to Veterans Day. Do we want to, is it feasible to consider having a second meeting for the month of November? Does it look like we need to for the workload that we're looking at? Anybody?
I don't think so.
No,
I mean, with some of this stuff, I'd like to see how
Yeah.
things pan out at town meeting anyhow,
Okay.
so.
I'm not available on the 4th, so it would have to be,
So, I mean, we could try to, just to get together on the 18th to discuss town meeting, but, don't have to.
Yeah,
I'd feel
I-
differently if we
yeah,
had,
a lot
you know,
going
like
on.
special permits or something, some
yeah,
ongoing
if there
business,
was,
but
but
Yeah.
Sure.
especially with the holiday and
Sure.
so on.
All
I
right.
might miss someone.
So then we're on to ongoing items.
again, solar, off-street parking, you guys said you wanted to hold off on until you'd nailed the solar down. And if we start talking about trees, then that'll bump that out a little bit further. Master plan we're kind of working on.
What about trees?
We talked about a selective cutting, so I'm going to try and find some information on those bylaws and just see what they look like and let the board.
Okay.
Along those lines, Adam, and this was probably a while ago now, but I know you had mentioned something in terms of the cluster developments and how some communities are changing the way they look at subdivisions.
They're the clusters by right, and the conventional is the special permit.
Okay. I wonder if that would, I mean, that to me is in the same spirit with the tree cutting.
Yeah.
In terms of how much space is cleared and so on. I don't know if we want to at
Absolutely.
least have a discussion
Sure.
about it.
And I can get you, I think the state is starting to push that model as well, so I can find some samples of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe not for November, but maybe first meeting in November.
Yeah.
December.
And actually,
Yeah.
that was
Embers.
That was one of my CPTC trainings last year. CPTC, Community Planning Collaborative Training.
Citizen Planner Training Collaborative.
And I think that schedule is available now too.
Yeah, it is, and I think if you want to, Marjorie sent it out, the workshop. So if you want to go, you can either register yourself or she'll register you.
Yep. So that was mostly for Marissa's benefit. They hold it over at Holy Cross in Worcester.
No.
Right now, it's the fall classes, and those are held at the RPAs. So usually it's the second weekend in March, they have the annual conference, which is what you're talking about.
Okay.
It's an 8-hour conference at Holy Cross. If you want to go, we'll pay for you to go. It's a Saturday, you go down. It's usually, you get 4 classes in, 2 in the morning, lunch, 2 in the afternoon. There's usually a keynote speaker. It's a good conference. They have everything from what is a planning board and what are we supposed to do, to very topical, specific classes. The people it's usually panel discussion, it's usually practitioners, local and statewide attorneys, state officials, going over the programs that they work in and how these things fit into planning and advancing the work of boards and planners across the state.
And there are workshops right now that
There
Marjorie
are.
just sent out.
Yeah.
And they're at a variety of different places.
I believe she did send those to you, Marissa, didn't she? Yeah.
This one is, the conference is in March.
Yeah, and it's down at Holy Cross, so it's really not too far for us.
I do want to correct something I said earlier. Open space, we're not looking at Howard Street. I think I had mentioned to everybody, Howard Street, we voted to pass on. 361 Mass Ave, which is the remainder of the land behind Walmart, the owner has reached out asking if the town might be interested for open space. So we have no idea what that entails. Part of that land is commercial, part of it is residential. We would not be interested in any way in the commercial, but potentially the residential. So the chair of the Open Space Committee was going to reach out to the property owner and look for permission just to go look at the land. Don't know if we'll take any action on it, but something that came in to...
Interesting. Thank you. So, seeing no public, I assume no public comment? Board comment or concerns? Okay, we got all our worked out stuff done.
Motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Second to adjourn?
994. You'll see the cars there.
We need a second.
Oh, second, sorry.
That's all right.
I just want to clarify for anybody that was interested, Marissa just asked, the site walk on Sunday at 10 is meet at the property. So again, that's 994 Northfield Road. I'm sure you'll see the cars there parked, so just find parking on the street, the Saliba property.
Yes, I thought, that's 94. I thought 994 was the
Settlers.
the golf course.
Well, according to the assessors, it's that address. I looked at
Okay.
the house that was demolished.
Yeah,
So
I
we demolished the house. You can't see the house from the road. Basically, when you
don't
drive up...
park at the golf course.
Don't park, drive up and you'll
dinky
see...
road before the golf course.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, according
yeah.
to the assessor's office, the town offices are gonna start occupying this high school too, so.
Oh, okay,
Assessors are not
okay,
all
so,
that up to date.
yeah, so,
Although they are in that case.
yeah, you will see cars when you go up Northfield Road, and you'll see cars parked along the side.
Don't leave, you got plans to sign.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion about going away? None. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.